The day Yuna met her husband for the first time, it was raining on the landing platform. Purple drops fell from the orange sky of Caritha, making soft sounds against the metal ground. She stood there in her ceremonial robes, feeling cold and small, waiting for the human ship to open its doors. Thought her father stood behind her with her two older sisters. None of them looked happy. This marriage was not a celebration. It was a sacrifice, a small price to pay for the trade agreement that would bring human technology to the Kirithan Empire. And Yuna was the price. She was the third daughter, the quiet one, the one who spent her days reading old books instead of training for war. Her sisters were beautiful and fierce. They would marry powerful lords and produce strong children. Yuna was different. She was shy. She was plain. She was, as her mother often said, not built for greatness. So when the Empire needed a bride for the humans, everyone agreed send Yuna. She was not important enough to waste on a real marriage anyway. The ship doors opened with a hiss of steam. Yuna held her breath. The human walked down the ramp alone. He carried only a small bag over his shoulder. He wore simple, gray clothes that looked worn from many washings. His hair was dark with some gray at the sides, and his face was calm and ordinary. He was not tall, he was not muscular. He looked like someone who would disappear in a crowd. Yuna felt her heart sink. This was her future husband. This plain, quiet creature from a primitive world. He stopped in front of her and bowed. It was not a Kjartan bow, he did it wrong. Bending too low, holding it too long. Behind her, she heard one of her sisters laugh softly. I am Duwan, the human said. His voice was soft and careful. He spoke in the Kirithan language, but his accent was thick and clumsy. I am honored to meet you. Yuna looked into his eyes. They were dark brown, almost black. There was something strange in them. Something deep and tired, but also something kind. I am Yuna, she said. Welcome to Karifa, that was all. No grand speeches. No promises of love. Just two strangers meeting in the rain, bound together by politics and necessity doubt. The wedding ceremony happened 3 days later. It was small and quick. The priest spoke the old words. And Yuna placed her hand in Duwan's palm. And suddenly they were married. She barely knew his name. She knew nothing about his world, his family, his dreams. Yet now she belonged to him, and he to her. The court found the whole thing amusing. They called the one Yena behind his back. It was an old Kirithan word meaning empty vessel. A person with no power, no presence, no worth. They laughed at the way he walked, the way he talked, the way he struggled with simple customs. Yuna watched her husband navigate this new world with quiet patience. He never got angry when people mocked him. He never complained when servants accidentally brought him cold food or gave him wrong directions. He simply smiled his calm smile and continued forward. At first, Yuna kept her distance. She had her own rooms in the palace, and Duwan had his. They met for meals and public appearances, but otherwise lived separate lives. She told herself this was normal. This was expected. They were strangers forced together. Love was not part of the agreement, but slowly. Things began to change. It started with small moments. Dohan would bring her tea in the morning, prepared exactly the way she liked it. He would leave small notes for her, written in his terrible handwriting, asking about her research or wishing her a good day. He learned which flowers she preferred and placed them in her study. You remembered every small thing she mentioned and acted on it later one evening. Yuna was working late in the library. She was translating an ancient text about the first Kirithan star travelers. It was difficult work, and she had been struggling with one passage for hours. Dawin appeared at her door with a tray of food. You missed dinner, he said softly. I thought you might be hungry. Yuna looked up surprised. How did you know I was here? I asked around. He set the tray on her desk. Careful not to disturb her papers, the servant said. You often forget to eat when you are working. She stared at him. No one ever noticed such things about her. Not her parents, not her sisters, not the servants who had known her for years. But this stranger, this human who had been in her life for only 2 months, had noticed. Thank you. She said the words felt strange in her mouth. She was not used to thanking anyone. Dolan smiled. It was a small smile. Barely visible, but it reached his eyes. May I sit with you for a while? I would like to hear about your work. She almost said no. She almost sent him away, like she had done many times before. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the kindness in his eyes. Maybe it was her own loneliness. Maybe it was simply the exhaustion of pretending. She did not want company, yes. She said, you may sit. He sat across from her, and she began to explain the ancient text. She expected him to grow bored quickly. Most people did, but Do-hwan listened with genuine interest. He asked questions. He made observations that surprised her with their insight. He did not pretend to understand things. He did not understand, but he tried to learn. They talked for hours that night, and the next night, and the night after that. Yuna began to look forward to these conversations. Do-hwan was not like anyone she had ever known. He was patient where Kirathans were hasty. He was gentle where they were harsh. He found joy in small things, quiet moments, simple pleasures. He taught her human games like chess and card tricks. He told her stories about Earth, about blue skies and green forests and oceans that stretched beyond sight. In return, she taught him about Kirathan history and culture. She corrected his pronunciation and helped him understand the complex social rules that governed court life. She found herself laughing at his mistakes instead of feeling embarrassed by them. 3 months into their marriage, Yuna realized something that frightened her. She was starting to care about him. One night as they sat together, watching the stars through her window, she asked him a question that had been on her mind for weeks. Why did you agree to this marriage? You left your home, your world, everything you knew for what? To be mocked and ignored in a foreign court. Do-hwan was quiet for a long time. The starlight reflected in his dark eyes. Because someone had to, he said, finally. The alliance was important. Your people and mine needed a bridge. And he paused, searching for the right word available. That is not an answer, perhaps not. He turned to look at her. The truth is more complicated. I had nothing left on earth. No family, no purpose. No reason to stay. His voice was soft, almost sad. I thought maybe here I could find something worth living for. Yuna did not know what to say. There was pain in his words, old pain that ran deep. She wanted to ask more to understand this strange man who had become her husband. But she could see he was not ready to share more dots, so instead she simply reached out and took his hand. He looked at her surprised. I am glad you came, she said quietly. I did not expect to be, but I am. Dawn's fingers closed around hers. His grip was gentle, but there was strength there. Hidden beneath the softness. Strength she was only beginning to understand. So am I, he said. And for the first time since her wedding day, Yuna felt something like hope. 4 months had passed since Do-hwan arrived on Karita. The seasons had changed, and the Festival of Crimson Moons was approaching. It was the biggest celebration of the year, a time when all the noble houses gathered to honor the ancient gods and compete for glory. Yuna was nervous. The festival meant crowds. It meant attention. It meant her husband would be on display, for everyone to see and judge. She tried to prepare him. She taught him the proper greetings, the correct way to hold his wine cup, the subtle gestures that showed respect to different ranks of nobility. Do-hwan listened carefully. and practiced everything until he could do it without thinking. But Yuna knew it would not be enough. The court was cruel. They were looking for reasons to mock the human, and they would find them no matter how well he behaved. The first night of the festival arrived. The great hall of the imperial palace was filled with thousands of guests. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting rainbow light across marble floors. Music played from somewhere above. Sweet and strange servants moved through the crowd, carrying trays of food and drink. Yuna walked beside Dohan, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She could feel the eyes on them, the whispers following them like shadows. Some were curious, many were mocking. A few were openly hostile. The one seemed not to notice. He moved through the crowd with the same calm patience he always showed. He smiled at those who greeted him, even when their smiles were false. He complimented the decorations and asked polite questions about Kirithan traditions. For a few hours, everything went smoothly. Then Lord Tarek found them. Tarek was a young noble from a powerful family. He was tall and broad, with the muscular build of a warrior. He had killed 6 enemies in ritual combat and wore their teeth on a chain around his neck. He was also drunk, his eyes glossy with fermented star bloom, and he was looking for entertainment. He pushed through the crowd until he stood directly in front of Dawan. His friends followed behind him, grinning with anticipation. "So this is the famous human," Tarek said loudly. Nearby conversation stopped. People turned to watch. "I expected something more impressive." "You look like a half-starved child." The one bowed his head slightly. "I am not much to look at, it is true. But I am honored to meet such a renowned warrior." Tarek laughed. It was not a kind sound, honored. "Do you even know what honor means? Little ape, your species was throwing rocks at each other while we were building empires among the stars." Yuna stepped forward. "Lord Tarek, perhaps we should be quiet." Princess Tarek did not even look at her. His eyes were fixed on Do-1 with cruel hunger. "I am speaking with your pet." Something flickered across Do-1's face. It was quick, barely visible, like lightning behind clouds, but Yuna saw it for just a moment. Something cold and sharp appeared in his eyes. Then it was gone and his calm mask returned. "I meant no offense," the one said. "If I've done something to upset you, I apologize. Tarek moved closer. He was nearly a head taller than Dolan, and he used his size to loom over the human. "Is that what your species does? Apologize and run away, no wonder. You needed us to protect you from the other races." Yuna could feel the tension building. The crowd was watching eagerly, waiting for violence. She knew she should do something, say something, but fear held her tongue. Tarek reached out and shoved the one hard against the nearby pillar. The human's back hit the stone with a thud, but his expression did not change. "Maybe I should teach you how real warriors behave." Tarek said. He pulled back his fist. Though what happened next took less than a second. Dolan's hand came up and caught Tarek's wrist. Just caught it. The movement was so fast that Yuna barely saw it. One moment Tarek was about to strike, and the next moment he was frozen, his arm held in place by the human's gentle grip. Tarek tried to pull free, his muscles strained. His face turned red with effort, but Dohan's hand did not move. It was like watching someone try to pull free from a statue. The entire hall fell silent. "I think," Dohan said quietly, his voice soft as always, "you have had too much to drink. You should sit down before you hurt yourself." He released Tarek's wrist. The noble stumbled backward, his face twisted with confusion and fear. He looked at his wrist, then at Dohan, then back at his wrist. His friends stood frozen behind him, their grins gone. What are you?" Tarek whispered. Dohan simply smiled, his calm, ordinary smile, just a human. Tarek fled. There was no other work for it. He turned and pushed through the crowd, his friends following behind him. Within minutes, they had disappeared from the hall entirely. The whispers started immediately. Yuna could hear them spreading through the crowd like fire. What happened? What did you see? Did the human really stop Lord Tarek? With one hand, Yuna grabbed Duan's arm and pulled him toward the nearest exit. They walked quickly through empty corridors until they reached their private chambers, only when the door closed behind them. Did she finally speak? What was that? The one stood by the window, looking out at the crimson moons rising above the city. What do not play games with me? Yuna's voice shook. I saw his face. He is one of the strongest warriors in the Empire. He has torn enemies apart with his bare hands, and he could not break free from your grip. He was terrified. The one terrified of you? Silence filled the room. The moons cast red shadows across the floor. I was a soldier once, the one said finally. His voice was quiet, tired. A long time ago in another life. I did things that I am not proud of. Became something that I tried very hard to forget. He turned to look at her. I came here to escape that person. To be normal, to be peaceful. But you are not normal, Yuna said. Are you? Another long silence. No, Dohan admitted. I am not. Yuna wanted to ask more. 1,000 questions burned in her mind. What kind of soldier? What did you become? What are you hiding from me? But something in his eyes stopped her. There was such pain there, such deep and ancient sadness that she could not bring herself to push further. Instead, she walked over to him and took his hand. I do not know what you are, she said softly, but I know who you are. You are kind, you are patient. You treat me with respect when no one else does. She squeezed his fingers. Whatever you were before. That is not who you are now. Dolan looked at her for a long moment. Something in his expression shifted, softened. The walls he kept around himself seemed to thin. Just a little. You are too trusting. He said, perhaps. She smiled slightly. Or perhaps I am simply a good judge of character. He laughed. It was a small sound. Barely more than a breath, but it was real. Your character judgment chose to marry a stranger from a primitive world that is true. And so far I do not regret it. They stood together by the window, watching the crimson moons climb higher into the sky. Yuna did not have answers. She did not understand the strange man she had married. But she knew deep in her heart that he was not her enemy, whatever secrets he carried. Whatever darkness lived in his past, she would face it with him, because somewhere along the way, without realizing it, she had started to love him. The attack came without warning. Yuna woke to the sound of screaming. For a moment, she thought it was a dream. Then she smelled the smoke, and she knew it was real. She threw off her blankets and ran to the window. The palace was burning. Flames rose from the eastern towers, painting the night sky orange and red. Shadows moved across the courtyards below, fighting. Falling, dying. Her door burst open. A palace guard stumbled inside. Blood pouring from a wound in his chest. My lady, he gasped. You must hide, they are everywhere. He collapsed before he could finish. Yuna's heart pounded in her chest. She grabbed her ceremonial knife. From its place on the wall, it was small and decorative, never meant for real fighting, but it was all she had. She stepped over the dead guard and into the corridor. The palace was chaos. Servants ran past her screaming. Guards fought against shadowy figures that moved too fast to see clearly. Bodies lay everywhere, some still twitching. Others completely still. Yuna recognized the attackers. Shadow Blades, the most elite assassins in the galaxy. They could kill without sound, strike without being seen. They were impossibly expensive to hire, which meant someone very powerful wanted her family dead. She pressed herself against the wall, trying to think. Her father's chambers were in the north wing. Her sisters were in the east. She did not know if they were alive or dead. Dot and Dohan, where was Dohan? She had to find him. She did not know why that thought was so urgent, so overwhelming, but she had to know if he was safe. Yuna moved through the burning corridors, staying in the shadows, avoiding the fighting when she could. Twice she had to hide as assassins passed by, their dark forms sliding through the smoke like ghosts. Her hand shook, her lungs burned from the smoke. But she kept moving. She found Du-Won in the central courtyard. He was standing very still in the moonlight. Around him, in a perfect circle, lay 7 bodies. Shadow blades, the deadliest killers in the Empire. Spread across the stone like fallen leaves. They were all dead. Do-Won stood at the center, untouched. His clothes were not torn. His skin was not cut. There was no blood on him, except for the blood on his hands, which dripped slowly onto the ground. He looked up as Yuna approached. His eyes were different. Gone was the gentle, patient man she had married. In his place was something cold, something focused, something terrifying. Then he blinked and the warmth returned. Yuna, he moved toward her quickly. Are you hurt? No. I know. She could not stop staring at the bodies. Don't, hon. What happened? How did you? There is no time. He took her hand. His fingers were warm and steady. Your sisters are trapped in the east wing. The fires are spreading. We need to get to them. My father, he is alive. Wounded, but alive. General Korra is protecting him. Dohan pulled her toward a side passage. Come stay close to me. They moved through the palace like shadows. Dohan seemed to know exactly where the assassins were, exactly when to stop and when to move. Several times they encountered enemies in their path. Each time the one dealt with them. Before Yuna could even draw her little knife, she watched him fight. It was like nothing she had ever seen. Kirithan warriors were powerful and brutal. They used strength and speed to overwhelm their enemies. They made fighting look like a storm, wild and chaotic and destructive. Dowan was different. He moved like water flowing around stones. He was never where his enemies expected him to be. His movements were small, precise, almost gentle, but wherever he touched, bodies fell. He did not fight like a warrior. He fought like death itself. They reached the east wing. The fires were worse here. Flames climbed the walls and consumed the ancient tapestries. Smoke filled the air, so thick that Yuna could barely breathe. Her sisters were trapped in the library. The door had been blocked by fallen debris, and assassins circled outside. Trying to break through, Dohan did not slow down. He walked into the group of assassins, like he was walking into a summer rain. They turned, raised their weapons, prepared to strike. It did not matter. In less than 10 heartbeats, all 5 of them were on the ground, and Doan was pulling debris away from the door. Yuna's sisters stumbled out, coughing and crying, "My Ray." The eldest carried a sword covered in blood, Jiwan. The middle sister held a younger servant girl in her arms. Myri stared at Dowan with wide eyes. You killed them all. We need to move, Dowan said calmly. The building will collapse soon. He led them through the burning palace. More assassins appeared, more assassins fell. Dohan moved through them like a knife through silk, clearing the path without breaking stride. Yuna's sisters watched in stunned silence. They emerged from the palace just as the east tower collapsed behind them. The sound was deafening, a roar of stone and fire that shook the ground. Yuna stumbled, but Dowan caught her, held her steady. The courtyard was filled with soldiers now. Palace guards, imperial troops, servants with makeshift weapons. General Korra stood in the center, coordinating the defense, and they're being carried on a medical stretcher. was Yuna's father. He was alive. Yuna ran to him, falling to her knees beside the stretcher. The chancellor was pale and weak, with bandages wrapped around his chest, but his eyes were open and aware. Yuna, his voice was barely a whisper. "You are safe, yes." "Father, we all are." She looked back at Do-won, who stood quietly at the edge of the crowd. Because of him, her father followed her gaze. Even in his weakened state, his eyes sharpened with recognition. "I wondered," he murmured. "When they sent him to us, I wondered, Father." "What do you mean?" But the chancellor had already closed his eyes, sinking into unconsciousness, thought by morning the attack was over. The assassins were dead or captured. The fires were controlled. The palace, though badly damaged, still stood, and everyone was talking about the human. Guards who had seen him fight told stories that grew with each telling. He had killed 20 assassins. No 30, no 50. He had moved faster than the eye could see. He had stopped blades with his bare hands. He had walked through fire without being burned. Yuna knew that some of these stories were exaggerated, but she also knew that the truth was strange enough, that her husband, her quiet, gentle husband, was a killer. Not an ordinary killer, but something far more dangerous. Something that had frightened the Shadow Blades, the most feared assassins in the galaxy. She found him sitting alone in the damaged garden, watching the sun rise over the smoking city. He looked tired, older than before. The blood had been washed from his hands, but something dark remained in his eyes. Yuna sat down beside him. "You saved us." She said, "You saved my family." "I did what was necessary. That is not an answer." He smiled slightly, but there was no joy in it. "You have noticed that I am bad at giving answers." "Yes, I have noticed many things about you." She reached out and took his hand. It was warm and rough, a working man's hand. A soldier's hand. "I have noticed that you are kind. I have noticed that you are brave. And I have noticed that you have been hiding something from me." Since the day we met, Dolan was silent for a long moment. The morning light caught the gray in his hair, the lines around his eyes. "The Emperor will summon me soon," he said. "When that happens, everything will change. You will learn what I really am." He looked at her, and his eyes were full of sadness. "When you do, you may wish you had never met me." Yuna squeezed his hand. "Let me decide that for myself." She said. They sat together in the ruined garden, watching the sun rise on a changed world. Yuna did not know what the future held. She did not know what secrets her husband carried, but she knew that she would face them together with him, God, no matter what. The summons came 3 days after the attack. An imperial messenger arrived at dawn, dressed in golden robes that marked him as a direct servant of the Emperor. He bowed to Yuna and Do-won and delivered his message with a voice that allowed no argument. His Eternal Majesty Emperor Vorath the Undying commands your presence at the throne of stars. You will appear before him at midday. You will answer his questions. Failure to comply will be considered treason. Yuna felt ice form in her stomach. No one was summoned to the throne of stars. For good news, the Emperor was the oldest and most powerful being in the galaxy. He had ruled for over 400 years. He had destroyed civilizations that displeased him, and now he wanted to speak with her husband. Though Han showed no fear, he thanked the messenger politely and began preparing for the audience. He dressed in his finest clothes, simple black robes that had been a wedding gift from Yuna's family. He combed his graying hair and washed his face with cold water. "You should eat something," Yuna said. Her own breakfast sat untouched before her. "I'm not hungry, don't want." She grabbed his arm. "What is going to happen?" "What does the Emperor want with you?" He looked at her for a long moment. His dark eyes were calm, accepting, like a man who had already made peace with his death. "He wants the truth," Do-won said. and I will give it to him." They traveled to the imperial palace in a hover carriage. The streets were crowded with people trying to glimpse the famous human, the one who had killed so many assassins. In a single night, some cheered. Some stared in silence. A few threw flowers at the carriage. But many looked afraid. The throne of stars was the greatest chamber in the empire. It was enormous, a vast space that could hold 10,000 people. Beneath its crystal dome, pillars of living metal rose toward the ceiling, pulsing with soft blue light. And at the far end, on a throne carved from a fallen star, sat Emperor Varth, the undying god. He was ancient. His body was more machine than flesh, sustained by technologies that predated the empire itself. His skin was thin as paper stretched over metal bones. His eyes glowed with artificial light, but his mind was sharp, his presence overwhelming. Every noble house in the empire had gathered to witness this moment. Yuna saw her father in his healing chair, still weak but refusing to miss this. Her sisters stood behind him, their faces pale with worry. Lords and ladies, generals and priests, merchants and scholars filled the hall in their thousands, all of them watching, all of them waiting. Yuna and Dohan walked the long path to the throne. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. When they reached the steps, they bowed as custom demanded. That the emperor leaned forward. His mechanical joints clicked and worked when he spoke. His voice was like thunder. "So the humans sent us one of their ghosts." The word rippled through the crowd. Whispers spread like wildfire. Yena looked at Daewon, but his expression did not change. "I'm retired," Daewon said. His voice was calm and clear. "There is no retirement for what you are." The Emperor's glowing eyes fixed on the human. "I remember the ghost program. It was 60 standard years ago, when your species was barely crawling out of your own gravity well. Your military created soldiers, unlike any the galaxy had ever seen, enhanced, modified, perfected." He paused, letting the words sink in. Soldiers that could kill a Kirithan war priest, in single combat, soldiers that could survive wounds, that would kill any normal being, soldiers that were for all practical purposes unkillable. The silence in the hall was absolute. Yuna could hear her own heart beating. "Your government told us the program was discontinued," the Emperor continued. "They said all the subjects died in a training accident." A convenient lie. He rose from his throne. Mechanical limbs extending to their full, terrifying height, but I knew better. I had seen what your ghosts could do. I knew that some must have survived, and I waited to see if they would ever reappear. He descended the steps slowly, each footfall shaking the floor. When he stopped, he was only an arm's length from Doan. "Now here you are in my empire, married to a noble daughter, living quietly as if you were just another human." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "Was this a human intelligence operation? From the beginning, were you sent to spy on us? To assassinate me when the time was right?" "No, for the first time." The one's voice hardened. There was steel beneath the softness, ancient and cold. "I volunteered for this marriage because I was tired. Tired of being a weapon, tired of being used. I thought maybe here, in a place where no one knew what I was, I could finally be something else." He looked at Yuna. "I did not expect to fall in love." Yuna's breath caught in her throat. "Love." The Emperor repeated the word as if tasting it. Such a human concept. Such a weakness, perhaps. Don Juan turned back to face the ancient roar. "But it is also a strength. The ghost program tried to remove all human weaknesses from us. They failed, because no matter how much they changed our bodies, they could not change our hearts. We still felt, we still cared. We still wanted to protect the people we loved." His eyes were steady, unafraid. "That is why I killed 14 of your shadow blades. Not because I was programmed to kill, but because they threatened my wife and her family." The Emperor studied him for a long moment. The entire hall held its breath. "Show me," the emperor said suddenly. "Show me what a ghost can do." He raised his mechanical hand and pointed at the far end of the hall. There a massive training dummy stood, made of reinforced metal and designed to test the strength of Kirithan warriors. It weighed over 3,000 pounds. Dowan looked at the dummy, then back at the emperor. "If I do this," he said, "there is no going back. Everyone will know what I am. They already suspect. Show them the truth." Donovan nodded. Slowly, he walked toward the training dummy. The crowd parted before him like water. When he reached the dummy, he paused, he closed his eyes. And then he moved out. It happened so fast that most eyes could not follow. One moment he was standing still. The next moment the training dummy was in pieces, scattered across the floor in fragments of twisted metal. Dowan stood at the center of the destruction, breathing slowly, his hands empty and unmarked. He destroyed it in less than 2 seconds. The crowd erupted in chaos. Nobles screamed and pushed backward. Guards drew their weapons. Yuna's sisters grabbed each other in terror. But Emperor Verath laughed out. It was a strange sound, old and rusty, like a machine that had not been used in centuries. But it was genuine. The ancient ruler was amused. "Magnificent," he said. "The humans are even more dangerous than I thought, and they sent us their most lethal weapon. As a peace offering." He shook his head slowly. "Either your species is very foolish or very wise. I have not yet decided which." He turned to address the crowd. His voice boomed across the hall. "This man saved the Chancellor's family. He killed assassins who would have murdered noble daughters in their beds. He defended the Empire when our own guards failed." The Emperor raised his mechanical hand. "I do not care what he is. I care what he has done. And what he has done deserves reward, not punishment." He pulled a golden seal from his robes. It was the seal of Imperial Brotherhood, the highest honor that could be given to any being in the Empire. No non-Kirthan had ever received it. The one of Earth, the Emperor declared. "I name you Lord of the Empire. You are no longer a guest in our lands. You are family. Let any who threaten you or yours face the full wrath of the throne." The seal floated through the air and settled around Dowan's neck. For a moment the hall was silent. Then slowly the applause began. The months after the Emperor's declaration changed everything. Yuna watched her husband transform from a laughingstock into a legend. The nobles who had mocked him now bowed deeply when he passed. The servants who had accidentally given him cold food now fought for the honor of serving him. The warriors who had called him weak now begged for the chance to train with him, though one accepted it all with the same quiet grace he had always shown. He did not become proud. He did not seek revenge on those who had wronged him. He simply continued to be himself, calm and patient and kind. But Yuna noticed the changes and how others treated her. To her father, once distant and dismissive, now sought her opinions on matters of state. He asked her to sit with him during meetings, to read diplomatic messages, to offer her thoughts on trade agreements. He treated her not as a disposable daughter, but as a valued advisor. Her sisters changed as well. Myra the warrior asked Du-Won to teach her human fighting techniques. She trained with him every morning in the rebuilt palace gardens, and slowly, a grudging respect grew into genuine friendship. Ji-Won, the politician, began inviting Yuna to her social gatherings, introducing her to important figures, helping her build connections that would have been impossible before. The court whispered that the third daughter had become the most powerful woman in the empire, married to a human lord trusted by the emperor, beloved by the people. Yuna did not know if the whispers were true, but she knew that her life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. One evening, 6 months after the attack, she found Do-Hwan sitting alone in their private garden. The crimson moons were rising again, casting red shadows across the flowers that he had helped her plant. He was staring at the sky with a distant look in his eyes. Yuna sat down beside him. She did not speak. She had learned that sometimes her husband needed silence more than words. After a while, Dohan said, "I received a message from Earth today." Oh, Yuna kept her voice neutral. "What did it say? The government wants me to return. They say the ghost program is being restarted. They need experienced operatives to train the new generation." He paused. "They offered me command of the entire project." Yuna's heart clenched. She had always known this moment might come. She had always feared that Earth would call him back, that he would choose his own people over her. She tried to keep her voice steady. "That is a great honor," she said. "Command of the program that made you what you are." "Yes, it is." "Will you accept the one turn to look at her?" His eyes, usually so calm, were filled with something complex and deep. "Do you want me to?" Yuna took a breath. She could lie, she could tell him that she wanted whatever made him happy, that she would support any decision he made. That would be the proper thing to say, the diplomatic thing, but she was tired of being proper. "No," she said. "I do not want you to go. I want you to stay here with me. I know that is selfish. I know Earth is your home and these are your people." But a voice wavered. "I love you and I do not want to lose you." Dohan smiled. It was a real smile. Warm and surprised, the same smile she had seen on the night they first held hands. "I already sent my reply," he said. "I declined the offer." Yuna blinked. "You declined?" "I told them I have a new home now. A new family, a new purpose." He reached out and took her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "I spent decades serving a government that saw me as a weapon. They used me, broke me and threw me away when I was no longer useful. I will not let them do that again. But the new soldiers, the training program, do not feel responsible for them. I feel responsible for many things." His voice was soft, thoughtful. "I feel responsible for the people I killed, for the missions I completed, from the damage I caused across dozens of worlds. That guilt will never leave me." He squeezed her hand. "But I've learned something in my time here. Something I never understood before." "What is that?" "That the best way to make up for past destruction is to build something new." He looked around the garden, at the flowers blooming in the moonlight, at the rebuilt palace rising behind them. "Here I can do that. Here I can protect instead of destroy. I can nurture instead of kill. I can love instead of hate." He met her eyes. "You gave me that chance, Yuna. You saw something in me worth saving, when everyone else saw only a primitive alien. I will not leave you, not now." Not ever. Yuna felt tears forming in her eyes. She tried to blink them away, but they fell anyway, sliding down her cheeks like rain. "I did not know what I was getting when I married you." She said, "I expected a boring political arrangement. A stranger I would tolerate for the sake of peace. And instead you got a monster." "Yes," she laughed through her tears. "A monster who brings me tea when I forget to eat. A monster who learns my language, even though everyone told him not to bother. A monster who fought through fire to save my family." She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I think I got very lucky." Dohan put his arm around her. His warmth surrounded her like a shield. "So did I," he said quietly. They sat together in silence, watching the crimson moons climb higher into the sky. Somewhere in the palace, servants were preparing dinner. Somewhere in the city, people were telling stories about the human lord who had saved the empire. Somewhere on Earth, generals were arguing about the soldier who had refused to return. But here in this quiet garden, there was only peace. Yuna thought about the future. There would be challenges ahead. There would be enemies who wanted Duhan dead. powers who feared what he represented. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, and a human lord married to a Kirathan princess was a target that many would want to destroy. But she was not afraid, because she knew her husband's true power now, not just the strength that could shatter metal, or the speed that could kill before an enemy could blink, but the strength of his heart, the love that he had kept hidden for so long, buried beneath layers of training and pain. He had been made to be a weapon, but he had chosen to be something else. Something better. And together, they would build a future worthy of that choice. Dohan, she said softly, yes. Thank you for staying, for choosing me. He kissed the top of her head gently. Thank you for giving me something worth choosing. He said the crimson moons glowed above them, painting the sky with light. The night was peaceful, the empire was safe. And in a quiet garden, two people who had started as strangers had become something far more powerful than any government or weapon. They had become a family, and that Yuna realized was the most human thing of all.